Welcome, everyone. My name is Wayne Eckerson, president of Eckerson Group, and your host for today. So just a little bit about the CDO TechVent. We designed them to compress the time it takes data leaders and their teams to evaluate emerging technologies and learn best practices for implementing them. Today, our topic is turbocharging data management and analytics with GenAI assistance. Before we begin, let's quickly walk through what you can expect over the next few hours. The CDO TechVent is a 2.5-hour virtual event consisting of a keynote, practitioner Q&A, featured presentations, and an expert panel. In a few moments, Kevin Petrie, our VP of Research, will kick off the keynote, which includes a practitioner Q&A featuring Gordon Wong, head of data at ActBlue, and Salvatore Traina, Group CTO at Beyond One, formerly Virgin Mobile. After this session, we will transition to our featured presentation with Bharat Padki, co-founder and CEO of PurpleCube AI. Following the featured presentation, we'll take a 5-minute break and transition to an expert panel featuring Traina, Phil Hendricks, Kevin, Kashul Rajveer, CTO of PurpleCube. I'd like to recognize our partner who helped make this event possible, PurpleCube AI. PurpleCube AI is a leading unified data orchestration platform designed to help make organizations more data-driven. So thank you very much. And just a little bit about Eckerson Group, which is hosting this event. We are a research, consulting, and advisory firm that specializes in data and analytics. You have probably read our research, but you may not know that our consulting division works with clients big and small, brand name and not, to develop data strategies, modernize data architectures, build data governance programs, develop self-service analytics strategies, data literacy, and a lot more. So contact us if you would like to learn more about how we can help you at your organization. And here's a list of some of our clients. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Kevin Petrie. For 25 years, Kevin has deciphered what technology means to practitioners as an industry analyst, author, instructor, marketer, and services leader. Kevin, it is all yours.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Very excited to join the session today and engage in a conversation about the hottest topic around generative AI, and perhaps step back a little bit from the hype cycle, the innovation waves, the venture capital enthusiasm, the press, and so forth, and say, okay, as data leaders, what should you know about how GenAI can improve productivity, can help you gain competitive advantage? And we're going to look at specifically applying GenAI assistants, also termed co-pilots in a lot of cases, to data management and analytics. I want to talk about a couple of trends that get the headlines. First, as we know, venture capital flows go up and down. They're down right now more than half since 2021, when there was a burst of enthusiasm related to COVID lockdown and telecommuters and so forth. But against that backdrop, and the inevitable fascination every year or two with a shiny object, there's sort of this steady, inexorable trend, which is getting more pronounced now, and that is investment in data and trying to become more data-driven. 3/4 of CDAOs now drive business innovation with data. That's up from a half in 2021, according to survey data from Wavestone. It's gone up and down some, but there's definitely a pronounced spike in the last year and sort of this ongoing trend. So I think the key point is that while tech waves come and go, enterprises continue to invest in strategic initiatives for data and analytics. And we need to keep that backdrop in mind as we start to look at generative AI and what that particular shiny object can mean to this discipline. Specifically, there are 3 initiatives that businesses are pursuing year in, year out, each year getting a little more serious. The first is advanced analytics, understanding, expanding the types of data, expanding the types of models that they apply to that data to understand their business, to understand their target markets, and to capitalize on opportunities and minimize risks. So advanced analytics is definitely an ongoing trend. It's building demand for data. There's also an inexorable trend of data democratization. It's not easy, but more and more organizations are looking to have their business managers make fact-based decisions, fact-based and analytics-based decisions as they run their business, as they plan strategic initiatives. And then the third trend here is obviously data modernization. The cloud investment wave is not new, but it continues. There's still a long tail of stuff on premises, and some of that will never go away, but there is a need to continue to migrate to the cloud, to become cloud first so that all your new initiatives are on the cloud. And that includes a real modernization of the data architecture that will support those cloud-based applications. So let's go on to the next slide. Given these persistent trends, there is an ongoing tension and imbalance. I was an economics minor, so bear with me briefly. There's a lot of supply of data, new sources, new data types, and so forth. There's extraordinary demand for data, and a lot of that gets to the prior slide. New users, new projects, new use cases. And so you've got this tension, explosion in supply, explosion in demand, and bottlenecks inevitably are resulting with the data analytics teams that try to reconcile the two. There are broken data pipelines, overwhelmed data engineers. We did a survey recently looking at two forces. Okay, GenAI and AI make data engineers more efficient. That's great. But is their job, are they going to be more in demand or less in demand in 2024? And the answer was 85% said we need more data engineers this year than we did last year. And in fact, McKinsey is recommending hiring more data engineers. Don't worry about hiring the data scientists, worry about hiring the data engineers. So that's just one symptom and signal about the pronounced need to focus on data delivery and analytics delivery. Ungoverned inputs and outputs are another symptom of the bottlenecks. And there's a challenge in that you could have, and a lot of companies do have, unskilled data consumers. Data consumers that can start to consume outputs, consume analytics outputs, but not know quite how to do that in the right context. Or they might be taking data that wasn't properly transformed or prepared. And as a result, you can have confused decision makers. So these are all symptoms of the imbalance between extraordinary supply, extraordinary demand for data. And data analytics teams are really struggling to keep up with the proliferating data sets and the voracious business users. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. GenAI assistants, also termed co-pilots, data grunts, data robots, and so forth, can help ease this bottleneck. And we've got a bit of a formatting issue here. I apologize for that. But there are three specific segments that we're going to look at. The first is working from the bottom up, data engineering, using language models baked into products to create starter pipeline code, to test, to debug it, to document data pipelines, to document data assets. And so that's the first layer, using these GenAI assistants, potentially using something basic or a sort of an open platform, such a public platform such as ChatGPT or Bloom, but more often GenAI assistants that are baked within data pipeline products in order to start to perform these pipeline management activities. The second layer moving up from that is cataloging. There are a number of vendors that are starting to discover, explore, and describe data products and automate the generation of text that does that. And so that makes data stewards and data engineers much more efficient. And then at the BI layer, there's quite a bit of innovation that's pretty interesting now, where you have power users and you have casual users that can become more efficient, more self-sufficient as they develop code to explore data, generate and interpret insights. So these GenAI assistants are language models that are enabling users to manipulate and interpret data through a guided conversational interface, to the degree that the conversational interface can start to overshadow the graphical user interface. So if we go to the next slide, we can put that in more context. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about some of the risks here. We've all seen amusing yet alarming headlines about the results of large language models and the types of logic that they apply to data. There was the Chevrolet dealership that started using ChatGPT, and a savvy user convinced ChatGPT to sell him a Chevy Tahoe for $1. and it was legally binding. There was also the lawyer that was introducing precedent cases in a court of law that didn't exist because he had pulled them from ChatGPT. Those are interesting, amusing, maybe corner cases, but the simple fact is that, as we know, language models can get things wrong, and hallucinations, along with intellectual property risk and so forth, remain a key concern, and folks need to keep that top of mind as they start to implement these GenAI assistants. I think that this data here from Wavestone is pretty interesting. 99% of data and business leaders say GenAI requires safeguards and guardrails. And by the way, 90% of them are increasing their investments in GenAI. So they want the opportunity, they want to take advantage of it, but only 63% of them have them in place. We did a survey last fall asking about AI ML overall, including GenAI, and 46% said that they did not feel they had sufficient data quality and governance controls in place to satisfy or support and help govern their AI ML initiatives. I think this comment here from the former head of analytics at eBay, Amazon, and GameStop, focusing more on ChatGPT, but it can apply to some of the GenAI assistants that we're looking at. If you use this as a replacement to data analyst, if you trust it too much, you can accelerate poor decision-making and propagate bad data. And the key element here is that this will exacerbate an existing problem, which is multiple sources of the truth. Wayne mentioned the Ackerson Group has a long consulting history and extensive clients. A recurring problem is multiple sources of the truth, data silos, duplicative overlapping data sets, and so forth. That problem has existed for years. For structured data and now for unstructured text even more. Companies need to figure out how to reconcile that as they get more serious about entrusting automated generation of insights and manipulation of data. So without proper controls, GenAI assistants can exacerbate longstanding governance risks. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. I want to quickly get a little more granular about the types of risks that can take place here. The challenges and risks should look familiar because in some form we've had versions of this for existing data analytics disciplines for some time. You can have hallucinations. That's actually specific to language models. And the reason is that these are essentially looking at statistical interrelationships of many, many, many words and documents in the case of text. And then it's predicting the next word or idea or string of words in a sequence based on probability that it'll get it right. There's no fundamental fact that it's going to retrieve unless you start to figure out how to do that with retrieval augmented generation, which we'll get into. So explainability is another challenge. You want to avoid having black box logic that folks cannot understand. Privacy is critical. Organizations need to make sure they're not inadvertently exposing personally identifiable information. And then there's handling of intellectual property and fairness. And fairness obviously just gets to the quality of the data inputs in most cases. You want to make sure that you're representing different groups, different demographic groups, and so forth in an equitable manner. So companies can reduce these risks by taking a domain-specific approach to GenAI and carefully governing its inputs. And that's what I think these GenAI assistants are starting to help do. So we'll talk about that. Next slide, please. All right. So the goal here is governed workflows. We've seen 3 waves of adoption that kind of started when the starting gun triggered in November 2022 with the release of ChatGPT version 3.5. GenAI platforms such as OpenAI, ChatGPT, Gemini from Google, and many others are helping knowledge workers of all types, largely in an ungoverned fashion still, do their work more effectively. It might be brainstorming an idea for a marketing campaign, for a sales pitch, it might be generating an email or a document to help people. So that's some incremental improvement in productivity. The next wave here is GenAI assistants, where you've got the language models that are baked into other productivity tools, software tools, and they become GenAI assistants. So Salesforce Einstein, GitHub Copilot, SAP Joule are just 3 of many examples that are getting a fair amount of currency. And that's the subset of tools, and within that, the subset of tools that we're looking at are data engineering tools, cataloging tools, and business intelligence as well. But the key point is that you want to move past just using assistants within your tool sets. You want to have users engaging in governed workflows. That's a higher level of maturity. It's a good way to get the benefits, which is to minimize risk while improving productivity and enabling self-service. So this is where humans are starting to incorporate GenAI assistants into what they do, following best practices, aligning with governance programs, and so forth. So a lot of this gets to trustworthy documentation, best practices, risk mitigation policies. And throughout this trend, most organizations are sort of taking these adoption waves in sequence. There's an increasing focus on enterprise's own domain-specific data and an increasing focus on business context. In parallel, there's an increasing focus on governance because you need to make sure that you're feeding these language model assistants. You need to make sure that you're feeding all your GenAI artifacts trustworthy data. So data and analytics teams need to incorporate these GenAI assistants into governed workflows. And so our goal here today is to talk about, I spent a little while talking about the risks and scaring a little bit, but there's a lot of benefit to be had here. But the key thing is to, yes, evaluate tools based on their capabilities, but also look at your people and process in a big way because it matters more than ever when you get into GenAI. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now let's roll up our sleeves a little bit and look at some use cases. Wayne and I have done a fair amount of research looking at analytics and at data management. We'll divide this into power users and casual users. So the power users, when it comes to data management, which combines data engineering and cataloging from the prior graphic we had. This is data engineers, it's data scientists who are getting more serious about how they prepare data for AI ML models, and data stewards as well, who help enforce governance policies, who help build and manage data catalogs. They are using GenAI assistants and can use GenAI assistants to generate and debug pipelines, to document pipelines, data sets, models, to automatically document them and put that into catalogs in order to more efficiently have a unified view of all their data assets in the business, sort of help realize the ultimate goal of the catalog. These assistants can also recommend data quality rules. They can document catalog and glossary terms, and they can help evaluate pipeline approaches. So you can come to, and data engineers are certainly doing this across the board with ChatGPT, as well as some assistants, which is give me some advice on how to prepare this data set or different architectural approaches I might consider in order to support this type of analytics project. Now, a key point with all this is that you need to have these expert users, these power users, inspecting and overseeing the outputs and making sure that they're not accepting anything that has errors in it. And so the human is very much still in charge. The comparison that I've been making is that a language model is essentially like an 18-year-old savant who got 1600 on his or her SATs, very eager to please, powerful brain, very little common sense, very little business context. They need oversight to make sure they don't go in the wrong direction. So now casual users, this is where it gets interesting because casual users are data analysts and business analysts who understand the business well, but they're not as sophisticated, especially in the case of business analysts, about SQL modeling and some of the more arcane technical aspects of data management. So casual users, if they're using GenAI assistants well, can start to perform exploratory data analysis, discover and query data sets, recommend or review recommendations about data sets to consider, basic transformations to perform. They can start to format and prepare some of their own data for analytics to answer ad hoc questions as part of a brainstorming session about business strategy. They can start to understand data sets and pipelines by reviewing some of the auto-generated explanations. And this is where we get into the benefits, ideally, of self-service, where the casual users are not leaning as much on the power users to get their jobs done. It's riskier. I think that a lot of the innovation should start with power users because the power users can make sure that they're doing the right things with this. But let's go to the next slide. So a power user example here. This is, we have Wayne role-playing here. We have a data engineer that's asking the GenAI assistant to write SQL commands that help merge and reformat tables from SAP and DB2 ZOS. As we know, that's a tricky thing. Those particular platforms can have some proprietary aspects to it, so it's not easy to extract and reformat material that comes from that. Now you want to explain that code. and recommend commands for debugging it. And another key piece is getting documentation for it and examining the lineage. What's the source of the answers? So ideally, that GenAI assistant is going to pull up product documentation that will support what they're doing, or documentation from an open source community. Another line of questioning might be, hey, I need to start tackling this new project. I don't know a lot about it yet, but I need to connect to a lot of various custom applications that my enterprise is building for its AWS environment, and I don't know where to get started. Can you give me some guidelines? And at this point, the GenAI assistant is going to push back and say, hey, I need some information here. I need to understand the metadata for this different applications, the files they contain, and so forth. And so once you get that, if the GenAI assistant is well calibrated and fine-tuned and has the right RAG guidelines for product documentation, it can start to ask intelligent questions back and make sure that it's going to provide insights that are useful. And then, a final command instruction to activate a function such as sharing some of the outputs. So if power users need a smart, eager assistant that understands a range of tasks and knows what it needs, and also knows what it doesn't know. Critical aspect of this. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Great. So now we're looking at GenAI assisted business intelligence. At the analytics layer, the power users are the data scientists, the data analysts, and the developers. Casual users are going to be more data consumers, data explorers, essentially business managers. Power users will want to get some sophisticated help, but also help speed up some of the repetitive tasks that take up too much of their time. They might get coaching on how to develop an application that embeds analytics functions. They can generate and debug code that transforms or prepares data for analytics, or generate and debug queries for different types of jobs. Explaining and documenting code, generating schema descriptions for cataloging, evaluating the outputs of language models, and then creating predictive features. And that final example is interesting because it's our belief that GenAI ultimately is a must-have feature. It's not a standalone initiative. And so the more you can have ML existing alongside GenAI and alongside SQL queries and so forth, you can have these rich, multifaceted workflows. And that's just one way to enable that. Now, the casual users have a similar dynamic where they need to be careful what they ask for, and they're going to need some real guardrails to make sure that they're only doing vetted, governed tasks using language model assistants. They might get recommendations about reports to consider. They might receive insights and start to explore data in an interactive fashion, ask iterative questions about the data sets or the charts that they're digging into. They might want a complex chart to be explained to them in words, a predictive model to be explained to them in words so they can answer high-level questions from auditors or executives that say, hey, I'm glad this machine learning model predicted X or Y. Tell me what went into that in simple terms. They might also want to kick off, activate functions, for example, sharing outputs, and then creating reports and dashboards. So we have an example on the next slide. Okay, so power user example here is we want to find reports that are reports that are about Asian business, and we want to extract the data from SAP. We want to debug the code and then explain the code and debug the additions to it. And we also want to, once we have some of that task completed, understand, okay, I have to build a customer 360 model. This is a new type of initiative. Can you give me some high-level pointers? That's the kind of thing that these models can be pretty good for, even just ChatGPT or Bloom and so forth, because they'll scrape what's available on the internet, and it doesn't necessarily have to be ironclad, factually cited information. It can be guidelines for an expert to consider. And you can have some basic translation, which can help with collaborative sharing of information. So as with the data management use case, this BI power user example highlights that you want to have a flexible assistant that ideally can go wide or deep, again, provided you have some vigilant oversight from the power user that's helping govern the inputs and the outputs. Let's go to the next slide. All right, success factors for GenAI assistants. govern roles and processes. We're going to talk about product evaluation criteria, and that's a critical piece of this. But as I said before, one of the unchanging principles in a dynamic, changing tech field is that people and process, I think, are harder than the technology. I think that people and process are harder to control than electrons and software code. And so you want to think hard about that. So the 3 stages here. First, you're going to plan. In our view, if you recruit those power users, the sophisticated folks, they know what they're doing, they know how to deliver, and they're have a record of delivering trustworthy results, whether it's data management or analytics. Those are the folks that can lead the initiative. They'll want to prioritize use cases based on business objectives rather than cool, shiny object experiments or science experiments. It's a cliche, but it's worth repeating that you really need to start with what the company wants to achieve from a business perspective. Maybe it's evaluate this target market and its profit potential. Maybe it's evaluate the existing business and the ability to win new market or win new customers with discounts. If you start with that, then anything you do to support it is going to be help and have the right level of focus. And then you want to scope the requirements and risks. So here we're starting to figure out, okay, if we're going to help this team of data engineers generate pipeline more quickly in order to ingest data from new custom AWS cloud-based applications, that's great. The benefit will be that we'll onboard new operations faster. The risk is that we will have faulty connections that prove unreliable. So there are a lot of different things that you want to make sure you're scoping in terms of what can go sideways. Then there's learning, experimenting with priority use cases in sort of a sandbox fashion, helping those power users start to experiment and say, okay, we know you have to get some work done here. Let's try this as a way to achieve that goal and see how it goes with those power users, inspecting the results and the outputs and documenting what they learn, documenting the lessons learned and the best practices. So then there's the sort of the evangelism step, which is to teach other power users, create a center of excellence that can, and in sort of a centralized fashion, start to foster smart people in other business units that are starting to use GenAI assistants to improve their productivity. And then you can start to test with casual users. That's where you're starting to get into the benefits of self-service. I really think that's a phase 2. Phase 1 can start with those power users because they'll be more likely to minimize risk as they adopt GenAI. So if you can establish that beachhead with power users, implement the guardrails that were so important and so lacking from the Randy Bean survey, the Wavestone survey I cited earlier, then you can start to roll out to the broader enterprise. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so guiding principles here. I've said this before, make power users your leaders and your evangelists. I think that it makes sense to prioritize productivity and risk mitigation over innovation. Now, that's kind of a bold, maybe dangerous statement in technology. Innovation always matters. It really does. But you want to make sure that you're doing responsible things with the GenAI assistants. And a lot of the principles, since so many of the risks are similar to existing, persistent, thorny data governance risks, good news is that most organizations already have been trying to address those data governance risks with an existing data governance program. And so you want to make sure that your power users, as you start to roll out GenAI assistants, are working closely with the governance team to adapt that data governance program to support that. And so that'll include, for example, documentation of guidelines about how data engineers should use a GenAI assistant to create pipelines and how they should make sure they're inspecting stuff, what steps they should take before putting that pipeline into production. You want to, as you define your product evaluation criteria, evaluate them according to what matters most for your business objectives. If you're dealing with a certain type of data that is not regulated and has a higher tolerance for data quality issues, then that's going to have a different set of rigor. And there are certain products, certain features you'll need for that than you would for a highly regulated data set. GenAI, as I said before, is really, in our view, a feature, a must-have feature of multifaceted workflows. And so keep that in mind that you still need data literacy initiatives, you still need to use a graphical interface. You'll still want to script some things. So this is another tool in your toolkit, but it's not the end-all be-all and the panacea in our view. And you want to focus that pilot project to the degree you can on alleviating business pain. It's not hard to find. I showed you earlier, big supply, big demand for data analytics teams, especially data engineers and data analysts caught in between. Those folks are in pain and they need productivity help in a big way. But you do want to make sure that what you do is designed to alleviate that pain to start. That's the best way to get to demonstrate an early win, some business results, and start to get executive support for a broader rollout. So if you can take this phased approach, focusing on incremental improvements, then you can broaden your rollout. Okay, so let's go to picking the right product. This is a rough product framework for GenAI assisted tools. This is not an exhaustive vendor list. There's, I think that there are quite a few options in the market, but these are organizations that oftentimes with some early preview releases are getting serious about incorporating GenAI assistance into what they're doing. And the two broad dimensions we can use to divide this. There are more segment-oriented tools in data engineering, catalogs, analytics, and BI. And then there are more suite-oriented approaches that we're listing here. The other dimension is that you've got very broad, deep pockets, but they're more platform-specific. So Snowflake and Databricks are very focused on helping you do everything you need within their platform. And then the cloud hyperscalers are as well. They've got a rich set of capabilities using GenAI as assistance, but they want you to sort of stay within their confines. So the key point is, as you start to evaluate tools in this segment, you want to differentiate preview features from GenAI assistance, and you don't want to rush into production. You want to make sure that you're experimenting with your power users to figure out what works and what potentially doesn't. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so these challenges I think are going to look pretty similar to what we shared earlier in terms of risk. I think skills and training is critical. So if you can find that island of power users and make sure that they're well trained to deliver results and to evangelize to the rest of the business, all the better. And a big part of that is ease of use. And so we're going to hear from Purple Cube. We're going to hear from other folks in our panel that will talk about how you can make the beleaguered data teams a little more efficient by making their jobs easier. So ease of use, I think, should be a top evaluation criteria. RAG and fine tuning. I didn't talk too much about the architecture of how this stuff works, but I do want to make a point here that retrieval augmented generation, RAG, an industry term that's getting used quite a bit, is a very important concept. This is where essentially you're giving a language model an open book test because you are pulling up ideally curated, vetted information, such as product documentation, such as specific metadata related to a data set, and you're putting it into the prompt so that when a user asks an open-ended question, rather than having it scrape the internet, it's going to look at that information and find the answer within there. So retrieval augmented generation is a powerful capability that a lot of these GenAI assistants can use to improve the quality and the accuracy of their outputs. Fine-tuning is also pretty interesting as well. We have another client, ThoughtSpot, which, like various tools, can help users provide thumbs up or thumbs down feedback on what they get back from a natural language interface. And that can be used in sort of a continuous feedback loop so that the language model starts to recalibrate its own parameters and thereby generates a more accurate, more appropriate response the next time around. So the RAG, given the model, the open book test, and the fine-tuning inbuilt capabilities can really help you improve the quality of the outputs. Guardrails, I think, are critical. That can take a lot of forms, but especially as you start to get into the casual users, the more that folks are given specific recommendations and rather being asked open-ended question, given sort of three alternatives, even buttons they can click, that can start to make sure that they stay on the happy path and a safer path. Explainability and lineage can help because when you have a recommendation of a chart to consider or a correlation of data to consider, or a data pipeline code to consider, if you can cite the source data for that, the source documentation, it'll really help. And of course, auditing to help satisfy compliance teams and regulators. So I think the key points here would be to inspect and select products based on their ability to improve productivity with minimal risk. Okay, I think that's our final slide here. Very good. So now we get to hear from some experts. And Gordon Wong is head of data at ActBlue. Gordon has a long history with data as a practitioner, as a consultant. He's doing some very interesting things now with ActBlue, and I thought had some very good perspective about how to approach GenAI. So we're going to tee up that video. He's on a family vacation. I think he's in the air right now, but we did manage to catch up with him and record a conversation that I hope you'll find interesting. All right, I'm really excited to continue the conversation here. We have Gordon Wong joining us. Gordon has some pretty rich experience as a BI leader with some notable organizations, Fitbit, HubSpot. He is currently head of data at ActBlue. And Gordon's also got extensive consulting experience. Gordon, I like on your LinkedIn profile that you say, you can't walk by a whiteboard without putting a data model on it. A good way to approach life.
I forgot about that one. Thanks for reminding me, Kevin.
Hopefully it's still true.
True.
So Gordon, welcome. Tell us about your current role, your background, what's your charter, and what are your key objectives for data delivery and analytics in 2024?
Yeah, in some ways, Kevin, they're the same as they always have been, right? So my technical background is that my core competency is data modeler, DBA, database architecture. I think in SQL, I think in data sets, I think in graphs, right? And so if I have to do something technical, I still love query tuning, right? I love thinking about data models that support performance and so on. But over the years, and really all I've ever done is analytics, data warehousing. I've had to expand my solutions, right, to more than just tuning queries, to like, how do I tune teams? How do I tune processes? How do I think about the overall solution for delivering better decisions, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. We want better decisions, so they have better outcomes. So, and what are they missing along the way? So in some ways, my objective has always been the same, right? Is understanding who are the decision makers, what their pain is, how are they suffering right now, how are they constrained, and what do I need to do to help them make that decision either easier or be able to ask better questions and they get better answers and make better decisions, right? And sometimes that's training, sometimes that's partnership, sometimes that's technology, right? But you have to look at the context and the situation to figure that out. So in some ways, what's old is new again, right?
No, that's great. One of the things I enjoy most about this role and Eckerson Group and working with our community of practitioners and leaders is that time-tested principles matter more than ever as you adopt new technologies. So as an example, data governance matters more than ever as organizations take a hard look at AI, ML, and especially GenAI. So very true. The interplay of the old and new is what makes it fun.
Yeah, and I think the broader framing is that if I contrast my world, what was I doing earlier versus what am I doing now? I've been able to move to the right, and by to the right, I've moved closer to the business problem, right? I'm not standing up server rooms anymore. I'm not configuring IO subsystems anymore, right? So I've been able to move away from the metal and trust into more firm levels of abstraction. Like Snowflake, I don't think about what CPUs are supporting Snowflake really. And I think about it a little bit, right? But for the most part, by having the opportunity to move up these levels of abstraction, I can move further to the right. I can work with smaller teams. I can get closer to the business, right? And consequently, because we're closer to the business, when someone asks a question, we can shorten the time to answer, right? It's not the mainframe days when you're tossing, it might take you weeks or months to generate. Now we're targeting seconds, and so I think that leads into the whole Gen AI topic quite.
Yeah, it does. No, it's a perfect segue, like you said, because the potential for Gen AI is to democratize business access to data so that people can start to prepare and analyze data more themselves. But I would love to hear how you're approaching the Gen AI opportunity. Mm-hmm. There are risks, there are rewards in terms of productivity, in terms of self-service for data analytics teams and for business teams. How do you size up the opportunity for your organization?
Yeah, I think you really have to lean into the context a little bit too, right? So let's acknowledge in 2024, many companies have a remote aspect to their workforce, right? We have a harder time interacting with our teams. We're not in the same time zone. We have less face-to-face interactions. And then so because you have to think about this, right? Because we're building products, so we have to think about how we're building products when we're going to add new tools like Gen AI. And then I just said earlier that we want people to make decisions. Well, when people make decisions, they have to have confidence, right? They have to have partnership. So we're generating advice for them to follow. How do we convince someone to make a decision using the knowledge we've generated, in this context? So some of the opportunities I'm thinking about is, for database people and analytics people, we typically don't build our own tools, right? I mean, we have in the past. That's where a lot of great tools have come from now, whether it be Airflow, right, or something like Airflow or something like DBT. But for the most part, we're not software engineers. We utilize other tools and we leverage our business knowledge to build great products in those tools. So when I think about Gen AI, I'm really, frankly, I'm looking at my vendors. Hey, these Snowflake, DBT, Hex, and not to be not to run a commercial for these folks. These are products I think are great. They're delivering value for me right now. What are they doing? What's their strategy to lift some of the constraints, some of the limitations in their product? Like for instance, everyone's generating SQL from AI right now. Okay. And then of course the pushback usually here is like, oh yeah, well, good luck building an entire pipeline or building 1,000 line, blah, blah, blah script to generate your SQL. But if you're looking to do that, you're using it wrong, right? I'm not. So in terms of my strategy right now is Gen AI and this features and products is not to outsource the work. I'm not trying to eliminate people at this point. What I'm trying to do is augment people. I'm trying to eliminate toil, right? I'm trying to give more partnership. I use some SQL generation tools myself sometimes, mostly because like in situations like, hey, I know how to write this code, but I can have somebody else write it for me and I can review it. That kind of like boilerplate toil kind of stuff. Or I'm looking at someone else's script. Let me get a quick summary so I get an idea of what I'm looking at, right? And so that I'm prepped before I say go through it. I'm not reading it cold for the first time. Those kind of things. Or even like something as mundane as like, you get some nasty little case statement where you're parsing some string to get a date out of it. I mean, I gotta admit, every time I use a date function, I gotta look up the documentation anyway. Why not get some help there, right?
Yeah.
I'm removing toil so that I could use more of my own expertise, so I can move quicker, so I can keep my head in the swim lane of solving problems like that, as opposed to fighting with syntax or doing repetitive tasks. And that's what I want for my teams as well.
So it's great vision. I think everyone's excited about the potential and agree completely that not creating your own custom tools, but rather going with commercially available tools is a simpler deployment option. Given that, what would you say are the top 3 evaluation criteria to size up BI tools, data management tools that have Gen AI assistance?
Yeah, I'm gonna look at so you should not go to the tools to ask what problems they can solve for you. You should start with problems that you want solved, and then go to tools that help there, right? Don't be the classic engineering problem is we throw technology, we lead with technology. Don't do that, right? Lead with the business problem. So if my problem is that, let's say I'm trying to build pipelines in DBT or some other product like that so that I can deliver data sets for my analysts to use, what's my constraint here? Am I struggling with quality? Am I struggling with testing? Am I struggling with rate of delivery, right? And then what tools can help there? So I'm going to look for, and I'm going to look for a vendor who has a compatible philosophy. Again, like give me practical, pragmatic value. Whenever you're at the cutting edge, right? It's so easy to sell vision, but like if you buy vision, you frequently get nothing. At least that's what I found. But when I was an early adopter of Snowflake, it was crystal clear what problem they were solving for me, right? Separating compute and storage, scaling elastically, lowering my costs, allowing me to deliver quicker, right? So they would say cloud data warehouse. I'm like, I don't care about that part. I care about elastic storage, compute, control over my utilization, that kind of stuff. And they really delivered. Similarly with products like Looker, the fact that I can I can define my business models in one place and then reuse that, right? Or I can have source code control for my analytics, right? As opposed to just a graph visual graph that you couldn't diff. These were real problems and they allowed me to go faster. right? So that's what I'm looking for now here, these criteria. It's like, are you solving a practical problem that I care about? Are you willing to partner with me? And that's always been true with vendors. Like, if you're not willing to partner with me, then I don't want to have the conversation, frankly, right? And then, is this something that my people are enthusiastic about? Like, I ask myself, if I ask my engineers or my analysts to evaluate this product, will they come back and bang on the table list to get money to pay for it, right? Or are they gonna say, well, sort of has some promise, Gordon. Yeah, we'll look at it, right? We'll implement it if you want. Nope, full stop. If I can't communicate the value to my team, then there's something wrong with the story.
Great insights here. I think those three evaluation criteria or guidelines, ability to solve a business problem, ability to get the enthusiasm of the team, and remind me your third one. I think that
partner.
The ability to partner, it makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because you've got that kind of balance between solving the business problem, but still getting the enthusiasm of technical people, because enthusiasm of technical people doesn't always align with business priorities. And so that's a balancing act as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Good. Yeah. So Gordon, great stuff. Really appreciate you joining. And I think we all learned a little bit from your insights here.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Kevin.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right, we're back. So now I would like to bring on Salvatore Trena, and we're going to talk a little bit about how his organization approaches GenAI assistance, incorporating GenAI into data engineering and data management workflows. So Sal, thank you
Kevin.
for joining.
How
are you?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Very well. Very good.
Very good. Okay, so Sal, I'm going to briefly introduce you, and I'll invite you to share any key aspects of your background that you think are relevant here. Sal is Group CTO of Beyond One, previously known as Virgin Mobile. Sal has about 25 years experience primarily in the telecommunications industry, in digital transformation initiatives, and especially data management. So I'm really pleased to have Sal join us today. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your background, your current charter and responsibilities as Group CTO of Beyond One.
Yeah, sure. As you say, the telco is my background, mainly spent with mobile operators, with MVNO. I worked with different countries and different, let's say, ecosystems on the MNO, on technology, on core network, on ESS stacks, all over the place and end-to-end. And then I focus much more on the digital transformation on the MVNE platform, hosting 6 operators in Italy, building the first full MVNO in Italy many years ago. And then, of course, moving again to the big MNO in Telecom in Italy, that is Telecom Italia Mobile, to build the first digital B brand in the country. And now in Beyond One, of course, what we are trying to implement is a little bit an enhanced approach. We are already in the digital world, Virgin Mobile and all the brands we are running here in the country that include, of course, Middle East, Latin America, and we will expand much more in all the emerging markets. We'll push much more the customer experience and the opportunity for the customer to find a really, let's say, clear enhanced ecosystem where they can really receive the hyper-personalized content, hyper-personalized information that the customer in proactive way is asking to us. So I would say that it's not only a telco approach. We are currently running mobile services. We are running fintech services in the Middle East. We are going to enhance other type of services that the customer, ask and will to have aside the standard commodity services.
Excellent. Okay, so Sal, it's a very interesting industry that you're in because customers are demanding, impatient. There's I would presume there's a need for real-time digital engagement with customers. Yes. There's also always the ever-present threat of churn, which makes things interesting. Sort of given that business need to focus on customers and keep them happy, both on a real-time basis and an ongoing basis. What does that mean to your data management and analytics objectives in terms of latency, analytics use cases you need to address?
But it's key for us having a proper data management and data analytics, because this is the way we are going to understand, first of all, the customer. We are going to build the customer profile. In order to deliver hyper personalized content, there is no way that the data source we are ingesting in our systems and the elaboration we are going to do on the data. From the real-time ingesting to the AI applied for the data quality, it's key for us to understand exactly which is the right profile and what the customer could ask, or what could be the best action we are going to take to the customer. Churn prediction is one example, but this is really basic. We are going to build a lot on the customer value management point of view, because one of our, let's say, customer is CVM people, CVM team. And this, of course, leverage on the data organization and on the data management, first of all. So what is the key element we want to address, of course, is having a way to manage properly our data quality, first of all, the way to manage in real time all the events and information that are happening in the customer life cycle and product life cycle, and then to act as fast as possible. In a way where, of course, all the people engaged in that activity will leverage, of course, the way to monitor, to create the data and to provide the insight that we need to deliver to the digital channel, because it's mainly then providing something to customer in a proper way. So that's the key elements we are looking and we are monitoring, and that's the reason why we are always looking for the right way to do that. Enforce, of course, impact on organization, impact on the tool you are choosing to do that, on the way we are going to democratize the data we provide. We have a lot of stakeholders that need data: customer service, business people, CVM team, a lot of. And to manage that, the key element is having a proper system, a proper organization that could provide the way to give the proper insight and to give the value to each of them, no? In the ecosystem.
So, Sal, great stuff. If we look at GenAI and the notion of using GenAI to assist data management and data analytics, there are risks, the rewards, we talked about it. I think the rewards are pretty compelling, especially for data engineers that are struggling to deliver governed data to decision makers. So how does GenAI impact your organization's approach to data delivery?
But I would say that I would differentiate, no, the way GenAI could be implemented in our ecosystem. First of all, we thought of GenAI as a way to improve our data quality, first of all. So we could automate, and we could get the best way to manage and to see if the data we are ingesting and the data we are providing are properly, let's say, aggregated and with the purpose of the scope we need to reach. This is the first point. We are not going yet in kind of augmented data and stuff like that. We need to manage this in a proper way, and we are not yet mature, I believe, to get much more insight from the GenAI point of view in terms of the augmented data or providing external or extra data that will make us much more, let's say, having input to the site. So at the moment, we are not yet in the stage, but for sure, automation and way GenAI could improve our data quality is the key element. On the other side, of course, we are looking to scalability and to collaboration approach, because our people needs to work in a very collaborative environment. And this is the key element where data scientists, machine learning engineering are working, because if not, we are not get a lot as a key point. So we know that we have our target is our customers, but people needs to be engaged to do that and need to be understanding how collaborate itself. But this is a way also to reduce the gap between technology people and data science people and business people, because sometimes, it's not easy to align on the use cases or to build or to create a very value on the stuff we are doing. So that's the key element, I would say, we are looking on the GenAI. And we are starting, of course, to do that. The pipeline tool we choose so far, by the way, is Purple Cube, is providing us the way to create our pipeline, but not only this, to enhance the way to create the pipeline and to monitor the quality we are going to ingest in our system. Because at the end of the day is the outcome we will get outside to implement our strategy to the customer. And that's the key element for us, an important one, of course.
Okay. And so would you agree with the notion, and we'll wrap up here in a minute, this is great. Would you agree with the notion that the key focus initially should be power users more than the casual democratized users when it comes to data management?
Yes, we need to create foundation. We need to create foundation to build this strategy. We start with data strategy. We enhance data strategy with AI ML integration, of course, that help us to do that. And then, of course, we will get our initial values, and then we will go further on that. But it's a journey, it's a stepped approach. We are not able to do a big introduction, while we typically do a stepped approach and get value for each of the steps we are doing. It's also a culture. It's also a culture changing in the company itself. So it's not an easy step. So it gets some time.
Okay, good. Sal, thank you very much. You're joining our panel next, which I'm looking forward to as well.
Sure.
So
see you later. Okay, thank you.
Good. Very good. So Wayne, I think we now have a featured presentation on Bharat Phadke, who is CEO and co-founder of Purple Cube AI, sponsored this event. Bharat has a long experience as a serial entrepreneur. Most recently, he's been CEO of Edgematics, which is a services and consulting firm. And one of the things that I've enjoyed about working with Bharat is that, like a lot of founders, he's sort of lived or experienced firsthand the pain within enterprises that he's looking to solve now with software. So Bharat, welcome. I'm going to hand over to you and look forward to learning from you.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here. Good morning and good afternoon for some of you who have joined from different places in the world. Thanks, Kevin, for the introductions, and thank you for the insightful keynote session. Sal, thanks a lot for mention of Purple Cube AI. I'm super excited to be here today and having that opportunity to share the views for the exciting times coming for data engineering. From my perspective, it's almost like a new era for data engineering. Embedding GenAI into data engineering is opening up so many new possibilities. This revolution truly bringing data engineering into the center stage where it always belonged. Next 10 to 15 minutes, what I'm going to cover today is 3 global digital imperatives every organization is embarking on, and how data engineering, and more specifically, GenAI enabled data engineering, is going to play a crucial role in success of these imperatives. Moving on, how embedding GenAI, bringing the assistance of GenAI into the data engineering process, is bringing that data orchestration and seamless automation and changing the landscape of data engineering forever. Talking of the digital imperatives, most of the organizations today around the world is moving to cloud, is adopting the AI and moving to automation. Gone are those days when organizations were still wondering, should I get onto these initiatives? That conversation now has changed from should I to how can I make it more relevant and how can I make it more effective for my organization? And what has emerged based on various conversations we ever had with various clients is everyone believes the success of these initiatives heavily depend on the enterprise data. And that goes to say that without a solid foundation of data strategy, these initiatives are likely to fail. Talking of digital initiatives and data strategy in context to that, if you got your data strategy, your data governance and data platforms all aligned, then you are living in a perfect world. You got it all. You are able to process and deliver the data in real time. You are able to prioritize your privacy and security. You are able to provision the data sets as data products with the highest level of trust and the governance for business consumption. And most importantly, you are able to embed the data in your decision making, in your interactions, and every process your organization is carrying out. Now, of course, that's a perfect world. And strategically speaking, majority of organizations have moved in that direction. Organizations are unifying data analytics. They're unifying the data warehouses and data lakes together, eliminating the complexities involved of having multiple platforms. But the same research also indicates that most of the organizations have failed to unify data engineering. Today, A lot of organizations still have at least 3 or more data integration and data engineering tools. In some cases, that number goes way above 5. Now, having so many different tools to do the same function, of course, increases the complexity. And we all know how this complexity gets started. It all starts with your first warehousing project where you need an ETL tool. And soon enough, from the batch mode, your need moves to real-time data and you get another tool. And from there, you need application integration, and there you go and have another tool. Fast forward, before you even realize, you get caught up in this hairball of data integration. And these are the challenges and limitations posed by the tools, because there is no single platform catering to all data engineering needs. In addition to that, every organization has its own challenges when it comes to getting access to the data they truly need to. Keeping the cost in control for your data processing and bringing that efficiency when it comes to data processing. Bringing that trust in the data so that business can consume that data more effectively. And even if you're able to get all this right, scaling remains a permanent challenge, because now you have to scale so many different tools and platforms to support that enterprise-wide adoption. And that's a huge limitation and huge complexity. Of course, when you're living in those complexities, you're not able to live in that perfect world we just talked about. You're not able to truly support that move to the cloud. You're truly not able to support that adoption of AI in the most effective manner. You're not able to take advantage of productivity gains using generative AI. And this is based on our observations with our customers and our clients. Automatically, all these limitations and all these challenges has a massive business impact. Time to market is one of the big ones in my perspective. Today, data teams still struggle to respond to the business requirements and business ask in time, delivering those data sets, delivering that analytics in time, because you're caught up in that spaghetti of crunching data through different tools and different processes which you have. That also means that you have multiple teams supporting different tools, and teams have to learn and study various technologies. Teams are overworked, and the whole approach becomes very ineffective. And to add to all that, the biggest challenge also is, biggest in business impact also is, you're paying huge bills for various vendors. Your on-premise deployments, your cloud deployments, you're not able to control those deployments. The capabilities and features which you have are overlapped, and you're not truly leveraging all those features and capabilities of those tools. And this impact is huge for organizations. And the key stakeholders who are responsible to make those organizations data-centric, make those organizations successful in embracing and making those digital imperatives a success, these key stakeholders are heavily impacted. Keeping these key stakeholders in mind, data engineers, data analysts, data scientists, data architects, data executives, we believe that there is a way forward. Embedding GenAI into data engineering could look something like this. First of all, a platform which can allow you to unify all your data engineering in one place. For all data, for all latencies, you have one place to unify all your data engineering needs. The same platform is able to automate your complex data environments, complex data pipelines, so that you are able to produce those data products and activate those insights within the platform, and also able to extend that to various other platforms from analytical perspective. And all of that is happening with the real-time assistance given by generative AI. This requires a little bit of deep dive in terms of what I mean by the real-time assistance of generative AI within this data engineering process. So Now imagine your data engineer, your data analyst, your data stewards are able to compose and schedule and automate end-to-end data pipelines for all types of data, for all latencies. But not only that, now able to, in real time, able to interact with language models to take assistance to understand that data set better, able to understand what data quality rules would be most applicable for this data set so that I can deliver the perfect data product to the business. Able to build that business glossary on the fly. No more you have to wait for somebody to come and tell you that what these columns and what these tables truly mean. Able to get that assistance in real time. Imagine the productivity gain of the data engineer in that real time. Able to deploy, rapidly develop and deploy fully optimized data pipelines is a huge productivity gain. And then it doesn't stop there, right? You have to distribute your workloads, and imagine you're able to orchestrate those workloads now, dividing your workload depending on the importance of the data sets and the cost of data processing in your organization, and then let that orchestrate through the platform. Biggest challenge when it comes to data engineering can be data pipelines break. You are able to monitor and self-heal mission critical data pipelines, so no more breakages and no more halts in the data engineering process. And all of this is happening with a central theme of active metadata in a common store. So you can leverage this active metadata now and drive your data cataloging initiatives. You remember the days when it would take months to build that business glossary, enrich your metadata, because it required workshops and consulting and discussions with business and so on and so forth. But now, bringing in the GenAI assistance within the data engineering process, not in siloed, but in the process, in the context with the data you're handling, you're able to almost instantaneously build that business glossary and enrich that metadata. So now with that, you are actually at the stage where you have built those data pipelines, you have transformed the data intuitively, you have transformed the data with the data quality rules, you have built that business glossary, and the data sets are ready for business consumption. Now, of course, you can extend that to choice of your visualization tools and analytical tools for further consumption. But within the platform itself, you could interact with the data in the English language format. You could ask the questions to this curated data set, or you could combine your curated data set with the raw data sets. You could as well throw in some unstructured data in that mix and ask those analytical questions and get the answers and the graphs and the reports and statistics. And all of that can happen in the platform. Bringing this concept and bringing this ideology in the platform, in the tool, and that's what we have done at PurpleCube AI, and it's just the beginning, and there's much more desired to be done. But what we have managed to do today is implement that process, what we just talked about, in the platform. And at the heart of the PurpleCube AI lives the tight integration between language models and the active metadata. And with that, you have the support for all types of data and all types of engineering associated with that data. So as we talked about, you could now build those data pipelines, you could build those data quality rules, you could build those data migration roadmaps with the help of generative AI assistance. This only increases the productivity of data engineers. The idea is not here to say, hey, you don't need data engineers. I think that's not the way forward. It's just only to ensure that data engineering productivity increases significantly. Data engineering becomes a center stage again, that heavy lifting that massive data movement, what data engineering does, requires that attention and that center stage. So along with that data engineering efforts within the platform, all the orchestration around the scheduling, automation, data cataloging, metadata enrichment, happening in the same platform, in the same location, with a drag and drop capability in the platform. And all of this is supported with enterprise class security features, enterprise class architecture capabilities, be it multi-tenancy architecture or in cloud or in hybrid or on-prem, all put together in one platform. This is the huge cost optimization, huge resource optimization, and performance optimization for organizations. That you are still able to do your traditional use cases, which any data engineering platform should support. Could be data warehouse automation, data lake automation, data migrations, data replications, customer 360. And these are all classical use cases can still be supported and can be done in a better way with the assistance of GenAI. And on top of that, these are the new use cases which we could not think of doing before in the platform itself, but now it's possible. So now you are able to just question your unstructured data and have that analytics done. You are able to do that exploratory data analytics with the English language query support. You're able to enrich the data quality. You're able to do that data quality assessment. So you're able to do those benchmarks to begin with, because how are you otherwise going to decide what is needed from the improvement perspective? I already talked about the metadata generation and enrichment part of, and that is something really gets me excited. In my consulting days, I've seen organizations burning midnight oil to build those business glossaries, build that metadata, but now it can be a completely different ballgame. With that, what we have seen with some of our customers who have already implemented some of these capabilities or at the early stage of implementing those capabilities, there's a unique value coming out having that unified data orchestration approach. And most importantly, for me, is time to value is the biggest one. You are able to do a lot more with less. You are able to accelerate your innovation cycles using those data sets. You are able to create more value. You're able to strategically allocate your resources, control the cost. You're able to reuse the code optimally, even if it means that you're not okay to expose your all data to the outside world in OpenAI format. You could still use simulated data to generate those codes and apply that within your environment, and get the same benefits which you would get if you were to expose that to language models. And most importantly, getting that seamless alignment with business objectives and data teams. That's the big one for me. With that, I think I come to an end of my presentation. Happy to take any questions now or later, but thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Kevin, back to you.
Hey, Bharat, great presentation, very clear and concise. A couple of questions from the audience. One was, could you elaborate on how your tool and the combination with GenAI can help improve data quality? You did mention it can help perhaps generate data quality rules. Is there something else as well that can be done to optimize this, huge pain point at many organizations?
Yeah, I think that is a starting point, and we are looking at it in a number of ways. So of course you could get the assistants to say, hey, what data quality rules are recommended for my data set? And that could be very contextual in terms of completeness of data, or it could be contextual to say, I want to be GDPR compliant, or I want to be following a certain compliance of certain country. And in context with that, it can give those recommendations. So it's not happening in siloed as just give me recommendations in general.
Great. Another question from Paul. Reducing the complexity of data engineering and slimming down the legacy tool set would be great. Yeah, that would be great. But in practical terms, how do you go about making this happen? Everyone's kind of wedded to these different tools. It can be very political to pull one of them out in favor of another, or he brings something completely new in that consolidates all of them. You must have experience doing this, obviously.
There's no straight answer, and that's what I meant by, we end up having those multiple tools to do different things because we believe that, we needed those different alternatives. But this unifying all the data engineering under one umbrella is the need of the hour. And earlier, I think we couldn't do it, but with the support of GenAI and having that mindset that we could support all those data engineering efforts in one umbrella is a big paradigm shift. And that's exactly what we are promoting. It's not easy. We've been starting that with, approaching specific use cases to begin with, and then kind of broaden that use and the use cases within the organization. But
yeah,
absolutely capable.
Right. Yeah, everyone was touting the modern data stack last year or a couple of years ago. And, when you looked at the diagrams of the stack, there are like way too many tools to implement that any one company could. So I think we're seeing that industry kind of move back towards consolidation of all these things to make the environments more, simplified. Consolidation will help improve efficiency and simplicity. So I think you're on the right trend here. So another question from the audience, kind of foundational. There was some confusion since GenAI works on, at least initially, text, right? Unstructured data. How can it work on your structured data? We know that it's seen enough SQL code that it can generate SQL code, but I'm wondering if you could help give a little tutorial on how you guys are using it to work with your structured data and tables and columns and things like that.
No, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think Kaushal is here, our CTO in the panel, and I will ask him to address that in most terms. Absolutely.
Okay. Kevin, did you have any questions, follow-up? Question coming in here.
No, I think that was great. It was interesting to hear from Sal and Bharat as well. And I think that there's interest from the questions that Wayne got as well. I talked about the inherent risks of language models and so forth, but a pretty popular use case is shaping up to be using GenAI to improve data quality, to generate rules, to enrich and facilitate your views of metadata. So that's pretty interesting finding. I'll also look forward to hearing Kaushal's take on handling structured data. Language models can certainly use inputs from tables and so forth. More often, it's going to generate textual outputs that wrap around or are applied to tables. And so it could generate the SQL code and so forth that then is applied to a table as part of a pipeline.
Yeah, so I've heard that too. You convert a table into JSON or XML or something. You can read that. So another question here from Greg. How do you address the company culture challenges in the implementation, I guess, of Purple Cube? Do you have a repeatable framework? Oh, there's another question that came in too, but go ahead.
So I'm going to assume when you say repeatable framework in terms of implementing the whole data engineering new thought process. And I think it's one use case at a time. You cannot, we are not taking this approach of rip and replace. We always say surround is the right way to do it. You'll always find that one or two use cases where you are able to demonstrate that you are able to handle these different kinds of data sets and different latencies, and it works. And you start from there. If you take that big battle head on, I don't think that's going to be successful.
Yeah, and a related question was, can clients or customers adopt modules in your product? Since you kind of span the whole data engineering spectrum, can they just implement one or two of those modules, or is it all or none?
That's a great question, and you could, and it already depends on how are your other pieces already in play. Meaning you cannot possibly say, hey, I'm just going to have a GenAI assistance towards English language query, and I'm going to ask questions to the data sets, unstructured data sets. But if you haven't done the whole data engineering process, if you haven't curated your data sets, then that's kind of going to be meaningless. So it really depends on how have you figured out other components, but it is possible.
It's possible. Okay, great. Well, listen, that's all the questions that we have.
Okay, I've been taking notes here on high-tech Post-it notes. Lots to learn, and I think this session is going to be particularly rich in that regard. Really pleased to have Kaushal Rajveer here as a panelist. Kaushal has a great background. He's currently CTO, Chief Technology Officer of Purple Cube AI, and he has a background in consulting and also with Northern Trust as a solutions architect. So pleased to have Kaushal's perspective. We also have Dr. Phil Hendricks, who is founder and managing director of IMMR. And Phil has a similar background in terms of consulting expertise. He was a professor at Michigan, I believe, and also an analyst with GigaOM. So Phil is going to share some of his perspective based on pretty extensive research in the GenAI space overall. Sal is back with us, and we've already introduced him. So, gentlemen, thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So we can get started here. Now, Wayne is also going to be fielding questions. We had a lot of dialogue during the first few sessions, which is fantastic. He posed some of that to Bharat, and we might have some other questions we can import here. But I definitely encourage folks to provide feedback, keep this a dialogue, and also provide questions that we can put to our panelists. So to kick things off, Phil, why don't we start with you? Data and analytics teams have the option of using ChatGPT, Llama, or other generic GenAI platforms. How would you say this option compares with using GenAI assistants as features of data management or analytics tools?
Sure.
How do you kind of weigh those?
Yeah. In fact, they're very complementary. I think there are roles for both. You think about what data teams are charged with doing, particularly the ones that I've come to call value-driven data teams. They're focused on doing more with less. They're trying to figure out how to democratize data, but at the same time, they're trying to address really thorny issues on behalf of the business. So if we think about the role of co-pilots, clearly co-pilots are designed to support the data teams, data engineers in particular, on those first two. I don't think they've progressed much in terms of addressing the third, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. But I like a phrase that one of my colleagues has used. These co-pilots and companions are like power tools. If they're available to you, why don't you use them? So I think you had a good discussion around some of the criteria for evaluating them. And work that I've done on behalf of enterprise clients, as we've looked at not only incumbents who have bolted on, and use that term intentionally, bolted on GenAI to their platforms. I think assessing those tools relies primarily on the extent to which the functionality does what the data engineers themselves were capable of doing just as well, if not better. But also, again, back to, does it make my job easier and more consistent and so on. In a lot of other research that's been done, I think what we found is that these companions or co-pilots lift up the bottom half of whatever subject matter expert we're talking about here. So it makes the average and lower data engineers better. Doesn't really improve the work of the top engineers that much, but it does make them more efficient. So again, primary criteria we've talked about here apply. I think the third category, though, of solving thorny problems, what I see are data engineering teams really trying to figure out how to leverage large language models more fully to, for example, ingest data, messy data from vendor partners, to bring in a wide range of disparate data from silos more quickly, easily, much of that unstructured data. And those are issues that companies have struggled with for years, but now we're in a position to, as the previous speaker mentioned, really orchestrate those data, bring in unstructured, combine them with structured data, and have a more holistic view, not only of customers, but patients and a lot of others.
Excellent. Yeah, it is interesting, and I like the idea of them being complementary because you can have some of the public GenAI tools. If you go to ChatGPT and ask an open-ended question, it'll come back to you with a generic answer that'll help you think, what haven't I considered? But a GenAI assistant within a tool can help you perform more specialized tasks. That's another way to sort of, you got the conceptual advisor here and the specialized task assistant within the tool.
Kevin, let me just add very quickly, obviously, there's a distinction between the generic models, so to speak, obviously, and domain-specific models, as well as fine-tuned models using RAG and a variety of other things. So there's a big space between the generic models and what the individual clients are trying to do with their own data.
Yeah, agree completely. And it's been interesting to see the speed with which RAG is being embraced as a way to improve the quality of the outputs and the utility of them. So Sal,
Yes.
I wanted to ask you in our prior session, and I think this is a great forum to do it, as you look at GenAI assistants to empower your data management team, what would you say are the 3 top product evaluation criteria are, and what guides that decision?
But the three main key area where we see generative AI and the help of generative AI is mainly the way to operationalize and automate the customer profiling creation, because it's the key for us to identify what the customer, which this customer behavior is, and to provide the customer the next action. Second of all is, I believe, to improve the customer services itself. So how the customer will get a better services using a lot of automation, using the way to identify the potential issues the customer is having. And of course, retrain again, the overall loop of the information through the AI. And in the technology side point of view, I believe generative AI will help a lot to, let's say, operationalize, if I could say, the operation itself. How to find out issues in the system that mainly leveraging telco operator or other big industry in this case to identify issues on the delivery of the services. Now, this will help a lot to automate and to reduce a lot of time to identify a root cause of issues, and then of course using generative AI also to address a potential solution that the human can, be helped to make a decision. So these are 3 areas where we mainly are looking at that. Of course, the customer side is the more important, but of course, the way to deliver the better services is for us the key. That's why we want to work on that integration mainly, and this part is the way we are going to enhance our customer experience overall.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think there's a fair amount of excitement about improving customer service. It's a knife edge because you want to make sure you're not automating and upsetting the customer, but if you can accelerate problem resolution time, that can be a great way to improve customer service. Absolutely. In terms of customer-facing applications of GenAI. Kaushal, you're working with a lot of large enterprises, and I know you can't necessarily share all the logos, but there are a number of good ones out there that are looking to orchestrate and consolidate what they're doing with data engineering. How do the early adopters at those organizations intend to mitigate risks that are related to privacy, intellectual property, and so on, as they look at using GenAI to get more productive?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for raising this very critical question that is the core of how we enable innovation while safeguarding our values and obligations, especially for large enterprises where stakes are inherently high. Right? So at PurpleCube, what we recognize that early adopters within these organizations play a pivotal role, not just embracing new technologies like GenAI, but doing so responsibly. Right? So our approach to mitigate risk, especially regarding privacy and intellectual property, is threefold. Okay, and that is what we recommend. First, robust governance framework. Right? We highly recommend a robust governance framework that delineate the clear policies on the data usage, access, and as well as the security. These frameworks are designed not only to comply with the current regulations, but are also agile enough to adapt to the future legislative landscapes, right, that are ever evolving. The second, advanced data privacy techniques. So leveraging state-of-the-art data privacy and encryption techniques also ensures that privacy is preserved at all data lifecycle. There are two places where data resides. That one is in the motion. While you are running your data pipelines, you are taking data from various sources and putting across the pipelines. And the second stage is data at rest, which is nothing but your data lake or data warehouse. So how do you really provide state-of-the-art data privacy across the stages? This is not going to only help maintaining the privacy, but also safeguards against intellectual property breaches by ensuring the sensitive information is always protected and not exposed. A third and very critical is the continuous risk assessment and compliance audit. Like in the previous keynote session, we really discussed that this is going to be a journey. It's a stepwise approach. It's not a switch that you switch it on and the other day you will switch it off. So it's going to be a journey. So how do you really employ a continuous risk assessment and compliance audits at a regular interval? That is also really going to help large enterprise to protect their privacy and intellectual property. So it's a threefold approach.
Okay. And just a quick follow-up on that. I cited some figures earlier showing a lot of focus on governance, but also recognition that companies aren't ready yet. They have some work to do when it comes to governance to prepare for GenAI. Would you say that's true? And are the early adopters, we've seen evidence that this is the case, but are the early adopters the ones that are further along the governance path already?
Yes, I would say so, yes. There are multiple evidences also for some of the large enterprises. While they safeguard their boundaries and they adopt a very robust governance framework, we do see those safeguarding guardrails as well as the framework in place. They also have continuous assessment framework in place. So the thought point which I projected, that is based on our customer implementation. It's a real-time pragmatic approach.
Hey, Kevin, there's a question that came in about that very topic, guardrails and assessments. And I was wondering if any of the panelists really could comment on how do you think organizations are going to implement guardrails, either at the prompt level or at the database level, to ensure that sensitive information is not leaked out, or that users can't access information they're not authorized to see. I think this is a huge issue for these organizations who are trying to benefit of GenAI, but they get confronted with these huge risks. Maybe Phil, you want to answer that one first?
I think training is critical, obviously, and there's a great presentation on, I think it's on LinkedIn. I'll find it for you and share it in the chat later. But it's on how CEOs should be using ChatGPT and GenAI in general. But it talks about the importance not only of having hands-on experience directly among the leadership, but also then the training and sensitization among the employees at large. So that's part one. I think secondly, just role-based access control, which we're obviously all familiar with in the context of data governance in general, applies here as well. And those kinds of capabilities can be employed in the context of generative AI as well. And then thirdly, just thinking about use cases and the tools that are used. There are tools that can minimize some of the challenges that we've talked about over the course of the last hour and a half, like hallucinations and things of that nature. So I think embedding those kinds of tools that prevent some of the mishaps are critical as well. So those are three broad areas.
So I maybe want to have Kaushal follow up on that, because we actually have a client here at Eckerson Group that asked that question about RBAC, right? How does that apply to GenAI, which you really can't apply it to the model itself. But how, if you have more data than you want users to see, even internally to an organization, right? How can you restrict who sees what coming out of a LLM? Do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the very first thing which we have seen across our customers is that they have robust infrastructure policies. What data which is going to be public and what data is expected to consume within the organization. So in employing a very tight policies around your infrastructure and securing your intellectual property and data is very first thing that we've seen. So that is one of the ways how do you really differentiate people who are going to consume your information and the sensitivity around it. Now, second, when it comes to various access and rolling back those various LLMs and everything, one thing which really helps us, especially for PurpleCube AI, is that we store active metadata, which is always as fresh as you ingest your pipelines. So we feel it's a wealth of the information. Active metadata is a wealth of information. So how do you really implement policy at the foundation level, which is your metadata, is something which is really going to help organizations to build those guardrails, as well as how exactly it should project those various accesses and mechanisms to the consumers outside or inside their organization.
Great. Sal, if you have a thought, please go ahead now. Otherwise, we'll let Kevin continue with his questions.
Just to highlight that, of course, data privacy security is key for us also, because telecommunications are strictly regulated. And,
right.
And in some of the countries, of course, a telecom operator could even lose the license to operate if for some reason there is a data breach or data information that will go spread, in public. That's why we already have in place, of course, systems to manage data privacy, aside for the risk management process. And anonymization of the data is another key element that we use a lot in our system for internal, mainly issues, not only external, that could be a potential problem, no, overall. So even the anonymization as possible, or whatever is being published, let's say, to user and role of the system, should cover this anonymization, or at least put in place some restriction that permit us to avoid any potential data breach, because this, of course, put in risk overall the business, no?
Yeah, and I think from what I've read too, that some of these commercial products, when you buy the enterprise license, you have to log on to those, so they know who you are, and they know what questions you can ask or not ask. So they have these gateways at the prompt level, right, that will filter out or reject certain prompts, and maybe filter out the responses on the other end to make sure private data is not exposed at the prompt level or the response level to the user. So I think that's just in its infancy. I think we're going to see a lot more of these types of gateways going forward.
Yeah.
Back to you, Kevin.
Sorry, this one last point to add. We also seen some of the large LLM implementation consultants. They also advise to give more than 30 parameters. I've seen personally to set the temperature of your responses which you are giving to your consumers, or what's the actually tone of the question. So there are more than 30 parameters on which you actually analyze the response which you are sending, or the questions is being asked. That's also one of the really smart way to understand how do you really safeguard your intellectual property, to understand based on the questions and sentiments, temperature, a lot more than that. You can set it at an enterprise level itself so that you protect.
So decipher that for me a little bit, in terms of parameters. How does that figure into controlling what people can ask or see?
It's more about not about what people can ask, but how do you respond to those questions, right? So let's say if it's a customer facing applications where actually you are implementing GenAI assistants, you really know that your responses are going to be softer because you are responding to your customers. So you can train and you can set the temperatures based on the applications that are consuming those GenAI, and those policies will actually help you to protect your overall branding image, as well as the security and lot many other things.
Interesting. Thank you.
So Phil, I'd love to get your thoughts, and others as well. There's if we look over time, there's waves of enthusiasm about different technologies to improve productivity and so forth. One of the things that's gotten the most attention and enthusiasm for GenAI overall is software development. Software development has emerged as a very popular use case for GenAI. And so it doesn't surprise me that there are a lot of benefits within that for folks that are developing data pipelines. But perhaps you could help us sort of compare using GenAI for overall software development and using GenAI for data pipeline development.
Okay.
Same thing?
Sure.
Same motivations or different ball of wax?
Yes. So obviously there are some similarities in terms of benefits that both software engineers as well as data engineers are looking for. And those fall primarily on the efficiency end of things. Beyond that, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I think data engineers are dealing with many more messy problems. And as a consequence, looking at tools like GenAI to wrestle some of those problems down and help them solve them probably represent problems that are different in nature, if not complexity, from what the software engineers are addressing. And again, I'll let others debate that issue on the call. But as a consequence, I think that GenAI, as we've discussed, are useful not only in the co-pilot sense of the word, but also for other purposes. I'll give you a concrete example. So one of my clients, again, is getting a lot of messy data from their partners, and they have data science models they've developed that make use of those data to turn results back to their partners. But the data are so messy that they have teams that are spending weeks, sometimes months, trying to get the data into format and clean it up so that the data modeling can proceed. So it's a very thorny issue, again, that perhaps is somewhat unique to data engineers and data modelers and the like. So looking at generative AI can understand what's in those data in ways that humans might, and shorten, compress the time required to clean up those data, organize it, put it into the schema that the data modelers would need, from weeks and months to literally hours or less. There's still a human involved in that loop that needs to review. They can't do it 100%, but even getting from 50 or 60% up to 80 or 90 represents a huge improvement. So I think the benefits sought on one dimension are similar. The benefits afforded by GenAI on some of these thorny issues that we've talked about are quite different. I guess the other commonality I would point out, and we haven't talked about it on the call or conference yet, is this notion of data products and the role that generative AI could play in not only serving as a conversational interface, but also enabling a whole set of new data products that we've not yet seen. So I'd throw that out there, and perhaps that's an overlapping area where software engineers and data engineers have something in common.
Very interesting. So I always like to put things in historical perspective, and we'll love to hear your thoughts, Sal, in particular. You've led IT organizations for a number of years. We've seen waves come and go. This one is getting a lot of attention, a lot of investment dollars. We all remember the craze related to Hadoop 15 years ago. That's probably not an apt comparison, but I would love to hear your thoughts about if you put GenAI in the context of prior technology waves, how does it compare? And what are the lessons of those comparisons mean to folks who are trying to plan the next couple of years for their IT organizations?
But the first point I would say GenAI will leverage and will help a lot is the data-centric approach and what the organization could leverage on the model they are creating on the data platform. That's, I believe, was not in the past a key element. It was not easy. Data-centric means also data democratization, how you are providing this information in a proper way. And then, of course, it brings again the data quality issues that it's all over the place could make trouble on your decision making, and of course, make trouble to your data. So that's the key, I would say, values that we are getting on that. And second of all, it's important to remind that we are in a digital ecosystem where, of course, in the past we were not so much, and we are dealing with the new generation, new way to integrate and enhance the experience of the new generation, where they are really fast to change you in a minute or in a second. So you need to really have the way to automate your data and to provide an action, a fast action to your customer. If not, there will be a competition issue. We are not going to make any difference anymore on the service we are delivering. We are making the difference where we are proactive action to the customer for any reason. It could be an issue, it could be a new service, it could be a subscription-based approach, whatever is it. So now it's changed the landscape of delivering a digital service to the customer. That's the key. And if you don't have a way to get the data, to operationalize that, and to provide insight about that, this will be really an issue.
Okay.
Sal, you raise a good point too. And if we think about mobile in particular, think about not only the volume, but the variety of data that are going to be coming out as devices are equipped with GenAI as well. So we really haven't seen anything yet. So it's going to be quite fascinating to think about how to handle that avalanche of data. And to your point, turn that back into services that really enrich the end user's experience as well.
Absolutely. That's what we are looking for. And we are trying to do. It's not easy, you know. For us, it's always a challenge. But I mean, tool system is helping a lot, of course, to make this faster and to empower also the people that are working, our data engineers that are working on that. Because as I said, it's also a culture change in the way we are delivering the service, in the way we are manage our customers.
And here it's multimodal data as well. So again, big distinction.
We are ingesting data, telco data, external data, no telco data. Telco data are not more enough, no, to try to provide this kind of hyper-personalization we talk about. So at the end of the day, you need to ingest different kind of data. And behavioral approach for the customer, it is the way the customer is using your data services, is surfing internet or is looking at social, etc., is the way forward where we are going to get a lot of insights. That is key for us to better serve our customer. So Internet of behavioral, it's something we are looking for, another way to improve our experience.
So this is great. So we have about a minute left, and Wayne can correct me here. I want to give the final word to Kaushal and ask, among early adopters, what are the top 3 use cases for application of GenAI to data management and analytics that you're seeing get the most enthusiasm, experimentation, and traction?
Sure, thanks, Kevin. To be honest, the enthusiasm that we are witnessing across the industry is incredibly diverse. But yet, if I recall the top 3 use cases that stand out, reflecting both the strategic importance and the innovative approaches the data teams are employing, are number 1, preparing business glossary or data definitions at enterprise scale. Right. So for large enterprise, one of the most evident or persistent issue is that some of the legacy systems are designed or the data were modeled for this kind of applications where even before many of the current data engineers were even born. Right. So leveraging LLM capabilities to understand this business domain, correlate various data models across the various applications or an enterprise architecture, and come up with a pretty contextual data definitions can really help the enterprise big way. And this is further being used for master data management, remodeling, machine learning models, and so on and so forth. So this is very standout applied use case that we see. Second, personalized customer experience. Very specifically in the world of today, where customer centricity is fundamental. Right? So creating personalized experience is a top priority, and our clients are using AI machine learning to analyze customer behavior, preferences, their historical data to deliver highly personalized recommendations. So again, back of everything is the data team who are leveraging both structured and unstructured data and employing natural language processing to better understand customer sentiments and enabling the real-time customization of the experiences. Third and more strategic thing that we see is exploratory data analysis. Most often than not, the data analyst or data engineers are tasked with preparing high-quality data sets for feature modeling, machine learning modeling. Right? So while the data engineers or analysts or ML engineers are working on analyzing the large data sets, they use a lot of visualization libraries of Python or R to analyze the large data sets, or even sometimes very large data sets. Right? So this is also one of the most common use cases that we see, that LLM will be augmenting the human capabilities with increasing productivity. So helping organizing your data as well as charting so that you can prepare your use cases in a more efficient way to provide you the highly accurate outcomes. So if I really summarize for enterprise or the consumers who are looking to building tangible and effective AI use cases, this is probably what is one of our fundamental value at PurpleCube AI. Our commitment at PurpleCube is to integrate technological innovations, but to do it so in a way that it is responsible, sustainable, tangible, and the most importantly, effective. Yeah, so back to you, Kevin. Thanks.
Good. So Wayne, I want to hand over to you. Thank you, Kaushal, Sal, and Phil. Great insights. I'm still taking notes here.
Thank you so
Wayne,
much.
I think we're moving to our wrap-up session. Is that right?
We are. So Kevin and I meet backstage to talk about our key takeaways. So be part of the process. All right. We'd love to hear your thoughts about what we've heard and see if we can summarize and distill the key learnings, which we'll then write down here with your help, Kevin's help, and then to you all next week.
Wayne, I got lots of post-it notes. Why don't you go first?
All right. So if we kind of work chronologically, you gave the keynote. Very well done, by the way. There are a couple of things that you said that I thought were particularly germane. So one was this advice, which I didn't expect, which is to start with the power users.
Yeah.
And maybe you could just elaborate a little bit why you think that's true. Again, just and we can capture it here.
Sure. I think power users are the most likely to use it efficiently and safely. They're the least likely to do ungoverned things.
Okay, you have a high esteem for these folks.
I will say I was having a conversation last week with ThoughtSpot, which is working with us on some other research, and they were saying they believe focus on casual users. That's their business focus.
Well, I think back to one of the early GenAI misfires, which was at Samsung when some of their developers put source code into the GenAI prompt, and that code got then vacuumed up by the LLM and it spit out to other companies. And as a result, Samsung kind of shut the whole thing down, shut all of GenAI down. So I'm not sure they're least likely to do ungoverned things, but I do think they're the ones who are, they have probably the most well-defined requirements up front and can probably benefit the most from GenAI. So the use cases might have more value.
And they sorely need help in terms of productivity, just getting through existing backlog.
Yeah.
And so if you can automate the drudgery, which was a theme in, I think, some of the panel comments as well.
Yeah.
That helps a lot.
Okay. All right. Good.
And love to hear from our audience. I know it might be a provocative. We do have a comment from Paul Sargent. Choose the right initial tasks, address current pain points. Amen.
Oh, that's okay.
Proven pain. Start with that.
So choose use cases wisely, I think, and that would be follow the pain, basically.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. As opposed to, I think that's kind of implying that don't follow necessarily what you think is the opportunity for the company, which might be customer service, customer troubleshoot, anything external probably might have more value in the long run, but certainly is more risky. I think we've heard some examples where that's gone completely awry.
That's true. And there are exceptions. There's a company called Jerry, which does a sort of a mobile app for all things related to car ownership. And they've used GenAI to reduce their backlog of customer service issues. They seem to have gotten some results, which is good. There's been some documentation of that. But I agree, that's higher risk when you're going to customers to start. So we've got another comment from Gregory Lewandowski. Always a balance. Do not underestimate those that interact directly with the client. Very true.
Oh, well, yeah, yes. This gets to, some of our clients are trying to figure out their GenAI strategy. And the first thing they encounter is, well, what use cases should we do? How should we prioritize? And then how should we solicit them? It's not as easy as you would think, right? So some companies have, hundreds of potential use cases, and they want to make sure everyone is heard. And then they need some methodology to prioritize them. So we're kind of getting external, conflicting responses here. Follow the internal pain or, follow customer value. So those are kind of a little bit contradictory.
Yeah.
So, but I would add to kind of resolve that conflict there, select a methodology for soliciting and prioritizing use cases.
Yep. And this kind of highlights that it's hard to talk about GenAI for data management and analytics in isolation, because when we're talking about customer service, that's outside of the domain of data management and analytics in terms of using GenAI. But so many companies that are adopting this are thinking broadly about where to apply GenAI across the business. So that was one of the takeaways I had from comments from Sal in particular, that GenAI is a big topic, and kind of look across the business functions, not just at your data team, to figure out where to use it.
Yeah, well, a lot of companies spend millions of dollars on their customer care centers. And if they can have a bot that's intelligent enough to slice off maybe 10% of those calls from humans to AI, or even 20%, that could save them lots and lots of money. And these bots are getting very conversational, and I've had experience with them, and they're pretty damn good, to the point where you may not even know you're interacting with a bot. You may think it's a human. You just chose to turn their video off.
That's true.
So Kevin, I thought a couple things you said were also pretty interesting. One that gets into what we're just talking about, how to prioritize. You said prioritize risk mitigation over innovation.
Yeah, maybe controversial.
A little controversial, yeah. So let's add this to the oars here, or prioritize risk mitigation. So you're saying that the risks of GenAI can be so big that ought to guide your selection initially, anyways. Don't take on something that it might have unintended consequences, right?
Yeah, I think so. Do no harm. Start small. If you start with the internal power users, you're sort of mitigating reputational risk to the company, which can be more existential. And related to that, Paul Sargent here has a comment, continuous assessment. And that's actually one of the notes I had for Sal's, I think from Sal, that you need to have a continuous risk, actually Kaushal, robust governance framework that includes continuous assessment of risk to support, for example, compliance audits.
I like that. Continuously assess risk. It's not a one-time thing, right? This was Paul, not a one-time thing. So someone or some tool needs to be assessing probably the prompts that are being put in, and so to make sure that your prompt gateway, whatever you use, is actually strong enough to, prevent unwarranted prompts. And then you're assessing the output on a continuous basis. I think there's products now coming to market to do both of those things.
Yep, no, there are. And I'm actually just checking, because we have a vendor that's coming out with an announcement in acquisition in exactly that area.
Really? Okay.
It might be, I might not be able to say more at this point. It might be embargoed. But yes, that is an area of investment. Vetting, validating the inputs, and evaluating the outputs too.
Yeah, talking about risks, Kevin, you have to adhere to your NDAs now.
Yes.
Right. Oh, here's a good one that you said. Don't rush Gen AI assistants, or what do we want to call these things? Co-pilots, companions, Gen AI assistants?
I think co-pilot is probably the most commonly used term.
Okay. So don't rush co-pilots into production. And why is that? It's probably for the risk that we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, it's the risk. It's the risk. There are just a lot of corner cases that haven't been tested yet.
Yeah.
Like that savvy buyer of the Chevy Tahoe for $1.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, test them thoroughly, I would think, as we said above. And that means that you have the tools. And the ironic thing is that right now we probably don't have the tools, so we need a lot of people to assess them both at the front end and the back end, right? So we may not be actually saving human capital here in the end.
Yeah.
So we'll say hopefully in an automated fashion with tools to be determined. Okay.
And human tests too.
Yeah, some thoroughly. Yeah, so manually today, and hopefully in an automated fashion, tools. Okay.
We've got some additional interesting comments here from Liam Hicks. He liked the use case
Who is this? I'm sorry.
Liam Hicks,
Liam.
creating an enterprise business glossary. That seems like a good initial use case. I agree. I think a lot of catalog firms out there are doing that, and that's something that's where you're automating the drudgery and the tedium. You need to vet it, but you save time because you didn't have to type it all out yourself. So that can help. Yeah,
I've seen that inside a bunch of data catalog tools. Have you seen it elsewhere? Actually, Purple Cube was had mentioned that themselves as their data pipelining or data integration.
They did. Yep.
So I guess they have the ability to do that as well, because they're obviously creating a metadata repository. Actually, that was one question I wanted to ask them. It's like, okay, you guys are sounding like you're kind of a data catalog collecting and a lot of metadata, but I didn't want to go down that route. Maybe you know a little bit more about them.
Well, I do like how they're using GenAI to assemble and document metadata, which can drive, one of the things they mentioned was drive faster resolution for broken pipelines. So that was another case of using GenAI to mitigate risk.
Oh, well, so they're talking about use it for observability. That's what you just essentially said, right?
Yes, that's the implication. They also are using it to understand metadata and start to talk about ontologies and how models relate to one another.
Oh, okay. That was deeper than we went to today, but we'll say metadata. But actually, they talked about using it across the whole spectrum of data integration, right? Pipe to deploy, build glossary on the fly, rapidly deploy pipelines, orchestrate workloads based on cost and priority, monitor and self. So a lot of other things, I guess we can say.
Yeah.
All right. You mentioned RAG and fine tuning. Actually, I have to confess, Kevin, I skipped one slide in your keynote, and you didn't.
I noticed. That's okay. It was probably for the best because it was kind of technical.
Well, it was about the architecture, right? It was about RAG and fine tuning. So I noticed you inserted that commentary later on, but that does seem to be a way to at least reduce the risk of accuracy, right, and hallucinations.
Yeah, exactly. Over time, based on expert feedback, thumbs up, thumbs down, and so forth, the models will recalibrate their parameters and get better at handling not just common user questions, but your own domain-specific data.
Yeah. So that's a little bit off topic from a co-pilot, though I suppose co-pilots, by the nature of the bean or beast, they are using RAG or have been fine-tuned to work in their specific capability domain.
Exactly.
Whether it's Word or PowerPoint or data engineering, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that data leaders should ask vendors, how are you solving these problems? Are you using fine-tuning and or RAG?
Yeah.
Or do you intend to?
Yeah. How architecting their co-pilots. And that brings up a good question that I don't think we talked about in the session was, before you enable these co-pilots in all the applications that are in use in your organization, what do you need to look at? What do you need to evaluate? What do you need to ask the vendors, right? I think first and foremost was, are you capturing our data and sending it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Which I have to assume that all of the co-pilots have turned that off, so they're not capturing data at all. But,
yeah, I think that would be table stakes. It's certainly something to confirm with the vendor, but you want to make sure that's not a risk.
Yeah. What other things should you ask vendors of these co-pilots about those co-pilots before you enable them?
Yeah, I think in general, asking the hard questions related to risk mitigation is critical. And so we've touched on several of those here.
Yeah,
but also ease of use, so that even net of training and licensing costs and stuff, the productivity benefit is going to be compelling, starting with the power users and then over time extending to the casual users. So I think that ease of use is a critical piece.
Well, and also it gets back into the security and access control, right? So if you ask a Copilot a question in your application about something that you don't have authorization to access, whether it's information or something else, how does it prevent giving you information you're not authorized to see, right?
Right. What are the methods by which you're going to...
Like if I ask a Copilot on a BI tool, why don't you create a dashboard, of sales across the Northeast and the Southeast, but I'm really not allowed to access the Southeast. How is that able to manage that control? Does it do it on the way in, on the way out? Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's an interesting comment here from David Eddy. He had a few, but one of them is talking about how the soon-to-retire subject matter experts be cut out of the AI loop. And I'll just extrapolate. David, you can tell me if I'm interpreting that right. I think there is this challenge where you've got, in general, very smart people who are going to phase out of the workforce soon, and all that tacit knowledge they have becomes a problem because they could walk out the door with it. And so with AI in particular, I think that can be a challenge because there are so many ways in which context needs to be baked into AI logic, and experienced humans have the best context. So how do you codify that?
When this GenAI first came out, I thought, oh, well, this is really interesting. If this really catches on, everybody will be using this to generate content. And before long, GenAI will have no original content with which to generate new content. And we'll all be just breathing each other's exhaust, which I think you can see that when you apply a generic LLM to a specific problem. You get very generic answers, that are not very specific or nuanced, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, but I obviously I think that will take a long time before it happens.
Yeah. So I mentioned this during the panel too, but it's interesting to look at how data quality seems to be a popular use case for these GenAI assistants, because they can recommend rules that you then vet and apply to pipelines to ensure consistency, accuracy, completeness, and so forth.
I'm not quite sure how it does that. I believe it can do that. Is it just kind of borrowing from information elsewhere on the internet, or is it looking at your data and making logical assessments about, hey, this is poor quality, we need a rule here?
Yeah, I think what it would probably do is pull up from a library of relevant rules that have been used for similar situation in the past, extract the ones that seem most relevant based on a vector similarity search, and recommend those. So it's one of those things where the expert power user gets it and decides whether it makes sense or not.
Yeah.
I agree with Paul. So Paul says that's because data quality is a hard problem and nobody really knows how to do it. Well,
we have some really powerful AI-enabled data quality tools already, these data observability tools.
Yep.
Like Big Eye, right? And Monte Carlo, and
for spotting anomalies and
they spot anomalies, right? Yeah, they're basically creating a baseline of whatever it is they're monitoring, whether it's data values or data pipelines. And over a short period of time, they create this baseline, and then they're very good at detecting when you exceed that baseline, and that's an anomaly. Or they can do correlations across time or parameters, right? So I'm not quite sure how they're using GenAI to improve that situation, but I know they are.
Yeah, well, I think the fundamental anomaly detection is the best way to spot stuff that could be happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the automated, but GenAI can help, as I said, recommend the potential rules to apply, or convert natural language rules into SQL script.
Yeah. So I guess with that, given that we're at the top of the hour, we'd like to thank everyone for participating and listening. I hope you guys learned stuff. We certainly learned from your contributions, so thank you very much. Kevin, you did a wonderful job organizing the whole event.
It's a pleasure.
Recruiting the practitioner speakers and panelists. So thank you to you.
It was great. I learned a lot. So thank you.
All right, everyone. We have a great rest of your day and week, and let's stay in touch.
All right. Take care.